Let's talk about the latest news on the NBA trade market, including players like Jimmy Butler, Kyle Kuzma, and more. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you subscribe right here to our 100% independent NBA channel. All right, lots to get into. Obviously, I'm still traveling, not in my typical studio space here, but Mark Stein on his fantastic Substack just dropped a decent amount of info here. Maybe nothing too incredibly surprising, but some important things as we try to round out the details of what the market is going to look like. First and foremost, Jimmy Butler. A lot of conversation around Jimmy, the Miami Heat. Is he going to stay long term? I've been saying no, that he probably moves on unless the market really just doesn't support any kind of an offer for him. Teams are going to be wary of trading for him, knowing that, number one, you got to give him a new contract. He's got the ability to opt out of his deal this summer and does have that player option for next year. And then number two, he's 35 years old. And I think those things certainly matter when we look at the value of a player on the market, despite how talented Jimmy Butler is. But according to Stein, the Miami Heat right now are willing to call his bluff. They're not worried at all about him leaving for nothing this summer because there's simply no teams with cap space except for the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Nets have in the past expressed interest in, or Jimmy has expressed interest in the Nets, but not vice versa. Jimmy Butler has expressed interest in going to the Nets, but the Nets are not interested in Jimmy Butler, nor should they be. Nets, don't do it. Whatever you do, Brooklyn, don't do it. You've got something good going right now. You are building for the future. They have a very bright future right now in Brooklyn. The way they are currently set up, the last thing they want to do is go all in on a 35-year-old Jimmy Butler. But Brooklyn appears to have very little interest in doing something like that. And Stein confirming that because of that, the Miami Heat, they pretty much look at it as though, hey, worst case scenario, we have to sign and trade you somewhere this summer. We'll still get something back in return. So they are not going to be pushed into making a bad deal for Jimmy Butler on the threat of him walking away for nothing in the summer. Teams are going to have to give real assets in order to get Jimmy out of Miami. And in particular, we're looking at the Golden State Warriors as the team that I would say is the favorite to land Jimmy Butler if he does wind up getting moved. The Warriors, would they be willing to part with, say, Jonathan Kuminga, a player who, in a recent report last week, a player who's mentioned as perhaps someone that the Golden State Warriors, because they didn't come to terms on an extension with him, they might move on from. Now, the Phoenix Suns have been brought up quite a bit with Jimmy. And Jimmy Butler, even right after the rumors came out, Jimmy added orange streaks in his hair because he's Jimmy Butler, and it's what he does, and you love it. But the Suns, it makes no sense. And Stein mentioned this. Look, the Suns having interest in Jimmy, I get it. They should have interest in Jimmy. The Miami Heat, though, should have no interest in Bradley Beal. That's the problem. That's the problem. Bradley Beal would have to waive his no trade clause, of course, in order to go to the Miami Heat, but that no trade would still exist. So do you want Bradley Beal on a $50+ million deal, plus he has a no trade clause if you're the Miami Heat? No, absolutely not. You don't. It does not make sense at all for Jimmy to wind up with the Phoenix Suns in a Bradley Beal trade. Now, if there's another team out there that wants Beal and could ship assets to Miami, maybe. But even then, given the fact that the Suns are a tier 2 apron team, it's just very difficult to actually get him to Phoenix. The Suns can't aggregate salaries in a trade. They don't have first round draft capital to give up. It's hard to imagine Jimmy Butler landing with the Phoenix Suns, despite Jimmy having interest in Phoenix and Phoenix having interest in him. So that's where we're at right now. I think essentially what Miami is looking to do is try to hold out, drive the price up on the Warriors as much as they can, throw out there that they're not worried about Jimmy Butler leaving this summer, which they shouldn't be, and then go from there and then negotiate from that point and hope that in the meantime, Golden State drops some games and feels a bit more pressure to go ahead and make a win now move to try to help Steph Curry. Now, Zach LaVine is another player who's out there on the market who we were hearing for weeks, for months really, that LaVine had no market, that teams are simply not interested in his contract despite how well he's been playing this season. I've been saying it for a while. Teams are running scared of the new collective bargaining agreement in the NBA. They don't want to see any type of long-term salary coming onto their books. And while that is true, there has been one suitor that has emerged recently, and that is the Denver Nuggets. However, this is an interesting sticking point to me, that the Denver Nuggets, as Casey Johnson reported and Stein mentions here, the Bulls don't want to take back Zeke Naji in a trade. That being a sticking point, that's surprising to me. Zeke Naji being the sticking point in a deal that could net the Bulls Michael Porter Jr. And Porter Jr. at 26, yes, he's got an injury history too, just like Zach LaVine does, but he's got a 3-year deal just like LaVine's. He could be seen as a long-term piece because Zach LaVine is 29 years old now and Porter Jr. is 26. I'm surprised that it would be Najee's contract at just $8 million and change over the next 3 years. He does have a player option at the end of it. That it's a bit surprising that that's what would cause the Chicago Bulls to not be willing to go through with this. But again, as I've been saying, teams are scared of the collective bargaining agreement. They don't want to take on long-term salary, and everybody is all about expiring contracts right now. And this is certainly evidence of that. Zeke Naji on a fairly small contract. I mean, we're talking about 4% of the cap at the end of the deal. And even that is enough to where moving off of Zach LaVine is simply not enough of a priority for Chicago for them to go through with a deal like this. I'm not saying it's a deal that's ready to go, but that would be the sticking point, taking on Zeke Najee's contract, and Chicago would want him moved to a third team in order to get a deal done. And as I've said, 3-team deals are where trade talks go to die. It just gets that much more complicated when you incorporate a third team. Also mentioned here, though, that the Denver Nuggets may be better off, rather than turning Michael Porter Jr. into Zach LaVine. Denver's also looking at, are they better off trading Michael Porter Jr. and turning him into, say, 2 players, maybe 3 players, breaking up that salary and finding more depth on the roster. Certainly something that the Denver Nuggets are lacking. But let's jump over to Kyle Kuzma. I would be surprised if Zach LaVine gets moved, despite how great, I mean, no question, he's playing great. Kyle Kuzma, on the other hand, I think does get moved. I think he gets moved by the trade deadline. There was a deal with the Dallas Mavericks, according to Mark Stein, that could have gotten done, but Kuz himself was asked, do you want to be traded to the Mavs? And he said no. Surprising. It could have gone to the NBA Finals, but Kyle Kuzma said no. But the belief right now is that he will not do that again. He will not make that scenario happen again. This is from Stein. No one I encountered at the showcase, the G League showcase taking place right now in Orlando, no one I encountered at the showcase was predicting a repeat scenario in this year's trade deadline. So the expectation is that if the Wizards were to, surprisingly, because the Wizards did not have to do that for Kyle Kuzma, but if the Wizards go to him again this year and say, hey, we have a trade to Team X, do you want to be traded? That he will not decline this time around. And the thing I really love about Kyle Kuzma, beyond just, of course, his play on the floor, which his versatility is nice to have in a forward, but $23.5 million this season, 21.5 next season, 21.5 the season after that. So I'm sorry, 19.5 the third season on the deal. So in Kyle Kuzma, you've got a declining contract. It's not just that he offers pretty good value based on what he provides on the floor. It's that his contract actually goes down over the next 3 seasons here, 2 seasons after this one. So I think it's a very attractive contract. I think there's going to be plenty of suitors on the market for him, particularly as we watch the Cam Johnson situation develop. You know, a lot of teams are going to have Cam Johnson as the wing at the top of their list. Once he's either moved or if the asking price is simply too high, which everything we've heard right now is that the Nets will set a high asking price for Cam Johnson. But once that happens, teams are going to pivot. Teams are going to pivot quickly towards Kyle Kuzma, towards Jeremy Grant, towards the other wings that could be out there on the market. That's something certainly to keep an eye on. Kyle Kuzma, a guy that makes a lot of sense. The Wizards, we know. The Wizards have flat out told us they are not done tearing down this roster. They are simply not done with that, and they're ready to make bigger moves. Kyle Kuzma, he does have $3 million in unlikely bonuses on his contract, so that could create some cap issues. But in general, Kyle Kuzma's got a very valuable contract, solid bang for your buck on it, and I think that this is probably a good time for the Wizards to make this move, try to land some future assets, and off you go. Now, Stein shot down rumors that the Mavs could make another run at him, saying that's not going to happen, but Sacramento. And Sacramento right now is struggling in the West. They've lost their last 2 games, 3 in a row. They've lost 2 to the Lakers, lost 1 to the Nuggets, 3 in a row at home that they lost. And the Kings, with them struggling, they're 5-10 in their last 15. They want to make a playoff run, especially with De'Aaron Fox already putting pressure on them. We did a video about this the other day. De'Aaron Fox, his agent Rich Paul, met with the Kings to say, what are we doing here? What's the plan? Fox did not sign an extension with the Kings this past summer, and now he can do it. He can sign an extension this coming summer. If he does not, or if he tells them right now, I will not, that starts a De'Aaron Fox trade season. The Sacramento Kings would have no choice but to put De'Aaron Fox on the trade market and figure out what they can get back for him if he says he will not sign an extension, because that is a very clear sign that he plans to leave when he hits free agency 2 summers from now. So the Kings, yeah, they need to make some moves. They need to figure some things out if they're going to rise up in a very loaded, very, very close Western Conference race for the playoffs, because if they don't make the playoffs this year, that's a very uncomfortable conversation they're going to be having with their star guard, De'Aaron Fox, this summer. All right. Those are the main pieces coming out of Stein's article here. Very, very good stuff as always. Oh, he also added in that he should have listed Jordan Hawkins as a player that the New Orleans Pelicans will not trade. But interestingly enough, Stein corrects that Jordan Hawkins was not listed among the players, the young players that the Pels don't want to trade, along with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones as guys that they don't want to move on. Yves Missi as well. So Murphy, Jones, Missi, Hawkins. Now it's a list of 4 players that the Pels don't want to trade. But the notable exception here, the name that's left off, and I'm not talking about Zion Williamson, not a surprise that the Pels might want to be out on the Zion Williamson business right now. It's DeJounte Murray, still not on the list of players the Pelicans don't want to trade. They just acquired him back in June. Is he back on the trade market again? Interesting that his name is still not among the players that the Pelicans are not looking to move on from. So a lot going on the trade market right now. Obviously, we're heading into the holidays. Things do kind of slow down a little bit for the next week or two. And then once guys start checking back in after they go and they have their time with their families and all that, we get into 2025. That's when the trade market does start to pick up. But you never know. We already saw this market buck the trend. There had only been 3 trades on December 15th or right around December 15th in the past 20 years or so in the NBA, and 3 trades total, and we got 2 already. So hopefully a good sign for the NBA's trade market moving forward. You never know when the next deal is going to come. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and go check out our latest video.